Welcome to Leading Your Culture, brought to you by the Multifamily Media Network. I'm your host, Bill Nye. While serving the United States Air Force, I was selected to attend the U.S. Air Force Leadership School, which is still the foundation for many of my leadership beliefs. That experience set me on a course for a successful career in business, consulting, mentoring, training, and speaking. In this series, my guests will come from many disciplines to discuss the most serious and at times not so serious topics on leadership and culture.
Well, hello, I'm Bill Nye. I'm your host. You probably have already checked out my podcast in the past, but if you haven't, it is Leading Your Culture with Bill Nye. And we are at the MRO booth, Chadwell Supply, here at the Apartmentalize Show, and booth 1801 if you want to come check it out. But I'm delighted to have my guest today, my friend Ed Wolff. Ed, thank you for joining me today.
My pleasure, Bill.
So Ed and I are going to have an interesting conversation, because anyone who's ever listened to my podcast knows I talk about leadership and I talk about culture. And so, Ed, I'm going to start with a real simple question. Is culture overdone? Are we making too much of it?
Yeah, so I will tell you firsthand, I've been fortunate to be with companies that really value culture, and the underpinning is on values. And it's not just what's on paper. It's actually how you hire. It's how you reward. It's how you recognize. It's how you promote. And so culture's a real passion of mine. And so that's why when you asked me, I said, not everybody thinks it's as important as it really is. And it really does matter.
So we're not making too much of it.
I don't think so at all. It's a difference maker.
Are we making enough of it?
I would say there's no such thing as making enough out of it, right? Because at the end of the day, culture is what drives everything. It drives how the company performs. It drives how it wins. It drives how it loses. So
for our audience, they're going to say, okay, this guy's speaking Bill's language, because that's what I say, that culture is the most important thing in an organization. Now, I want to touch on something you just said. You said it controls or it influences, I'm paraphrasing what you said, your hiring, your promotions, your recognition, your rewards, so on and so forth. One of the things I say is that I don't think people fully understand exactly what culture is. And so bear with me for just a moment. I break culture down into three things. Number one, I believe it's what you expect. Number two, it's what you will and will not tolerate. And number three, it's how we treat one another. And so when companies really focus on how they treat one another, which is rewards, recognition, promotions, bonuses, hiring, termination, so on and so forth, right?
Yep.
So you agree that is a big component of anyone's culture?
100%. And if I can, let me give you one example of this that I think really will resonate for the audience. I've worked with a lot of people over 30 years, right? And they can be technically competent, but if there's not cultural alignment and they are managing by fear and intimidation, or they're being a bully, I'm going to select them and opt them off the island. Because how I treat people, how I reward people matters, and other people are watching, right? So if I am enabling a bully behavior or creating a toxic culture, you have to eradicate that and do it quickly, because the others that have signed up for the cultural alignment, right, will then become disenfranchised, because they will then see that behavior is tolerated and accepted. And that becomes a fait accompli.
Right. So then that becomes a part of your culture.
Exactly.
Because, see, most people, Ed, say that you build a culture. I take a completely different viewpoint. I don't believe you build a culture. Think about it this way. Anything you build is an inanimate object, right? Yep. But I believe a culture is a living thing.
It is.
So therefore, you don't build a culture, you grow a culture. Not only that, but anything you build, building suggests that at some point, you're going to complete the work. I don't believe you ever complete the work of growing a culture. I believe you have to constantly tend to it, focus on it, pay attention to it. So what you just talked about, what most people call, toxic behavior, toxic cultures, in my vernacular, I call those weeds. And so, I think you have to be very intentional about what it is you want to grow. But regardless of how good of a farmer or gardener you are, think about this. You've got a flower bed or a vegetable garden at home, and you're really working hard, to produce what you want, right? That's what you're doing with your culture. You're trying to produce what you want. Yep. But what happens overnight? You go out to your garden the next morning, what do you find?
Either it's been picked over, or it's died, or it's thriving,
or weeds may have sprouted.
Or weeds may have sprouted up.
And that's the thing about weeds is, what do weeds need in order to take root?
They need food. They need water.
That's right.
And the more you do, the more the weeds grow.
The bigger they get, the deeper the roots, the harder it is to get it out of your culture.
Amen.
And so that's what you were just talking about, right? Is that when you've got that person who gets results by being, so there's a book out there written by an author named Robert Sutton. Everybody forgive me, I'm going to use profanity. Anybody who knows me knows I don't use profanity, but the book is called The No Asshole Rule. And so the whole idea is that companies tolerate that behavior you just described,
right?
Because that person gets results.
And so here's the thing, I won't tolerate that personally. So anyone that's ever worked with me, because I am a big believer, Bill, people follow people. And those people know what is accepted and what's not. And oh, by the way, you have to constantly remind them. So I love the analogy of growing culture because it's true. It's not an event. It's not producing 5 core values, slapping it on a whiteboard, and then talking about it once a month at a town hall meeting.
That's right.
Right? It's cultivating, it's growing it, it's nourishing it, it's providing the care and feeding, it's leading by example, it's walking the talk, it's bringing like-minded people to evangelize culture and why it's so important. Those people that think it's a one-time event, or it says, well, we did it. We got culture. Right. Those are the wrong people. And when I hear that, I run for the hills.
But they're right. They do have culture because culture grows everywhere.
Right.
But what they're growing are weeds.
Right.
Because they're not intentional about it.
Exactly.
And so to your point, you have your core values, to slap it on the wall and you say, okay, they're good. We've done our heavy lifting. We've done what we need to do. The truth of the matter is, if I'm not constantly weeding my garden on a weekly basis, think about this. You could have a crack in a sidewalk and a little seed will fall into that crack in the sidewalk. And that seed, which is a weed, will actually will crack concrete, asphalt, and brick. I mean, it's incredible how powerful weeds can be in a culture.
100%. I need to share with you one example here because it was really powerful to talk about culture and why it was so important. 1998, MindSpring, first internet service provider. The business was started by Charles Brewer out of a garage, and we had core values and beliefs, also known as CV&Bs. And one of the CV&Bs that I still remember to this day is we love to compete, and we believe that competition brings out the best in us. And it was very powerful because some people will disparage competition.
That's right.
I'm not a disparagement kind of guy. I love competition. It's going to make me better. Right. But think about it, 1998 to 2024, and I'm still rehearsing that core value and belief.
Wow.
And so it wasn't just words. It was how we recruited people. It's how we rewarded people. It's how we promoted people. It's how we made examples out of people. And that permeated throughout the culture. And that stuck with me. And it stuck with so many other people because even after I left, in 2000, and I would wear my MindSpring shirt at Kroger, people would knock me down in the grocery store and say, Ed, how can I go work for MindSpring? Like, you guys have such a magical culture. And it was because we grew it. We were intentional about it. And so that's why I love the analogy.
Listen, I think that's the key, is you have to be intentional. You have to give attention to your culture every single day. Because culture drives every aspect of your business. Culture drives every dollar in revenue a company earns. Culture drives every dollar that a company spends. Culture drives a company's marketing strategy. Culture drives their hiring strategy. It drives every aspect of what the customer feels. But by the way, Ed, my personal email address to this day is a MindSpring email address.
Wow. I had Wolff at mindspring.com.
Yeah, I still have
forever and ever.
I still have Bill Nye at mindspring.com.
Wow.
Still exists, still use it.
Wow,
I get
awesome.
hundreds of emails come to me every day. Bill Nye at mindspring.com.
I'm going to now send you an email.
Yeah, please do. So I'm glad to know that, because I don't think that, people understand the full impact of this. That this is just a business buzzword like empowerment or, some of the other business buzzwords that we use. And I think that that's a big mistake that leaders make, So when somebody comes into an organization and you've made some career changes, occasionally in your career,
right,
and you jump into the culture because obviously that's what you're focusing on,
right.
Anything jump out to you like some things that in the very beginning, these are things that I really focus on from day one?
So I'll tell you, and I'm going to use the Airwave example.
Please
right?
do.
When I started talking with Airwave and the leadership team, the CEO, Jeff Koch, who came from the multifamily industry, Mill Creek Residential, the first thing he said to me was, people matter most. And that resonated with me personally, like it tugged on my heartstrings. And through the series of conversations and interactions, right, I would probe deeper. What do you mean that by people matter most? Because I will tell you, I sign up for people follow people. Yeah. And he basically said, that's what I mean, right? So there's alignment right there. And when he was searching for a president and chief revenue officer, one of the things he said to me that stuck out to him, right, because there's lots of people in the market, he said the thing that stuck out to him is the alignment of that value. And so for me, right, one of my questions, sure, I want to see the financials, sure, I want to see the business model, but I want to understand the culture. I want to understand why people are there, why people have left, what do other people think about the business? Are the people that are there like-minded? That all matters, right? Because I do think people follow people, and the leader sets the tone.
But like-minded, I don't think that means that we're always in agreement.
Correct.
To me, like-minded means that we want the same outcome.
We want the same outcomes.
But like-minded means that we have planted into our culture garden the ability to challenge anyone and everyone for the right outcome.
100%. I don't want what I call lapdogs. I want people that are going to challenge, right? They're going to come with solutions, not just problems, and that they want to be part of the solution, right? So to your point about, empowerment, enablement, these are buzzwords. Are they really practiced?
Yeah, right.
Are they really practiced, or is it just words?
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I call it the LinkedIn lie. Everybody likes to go on LinkedIn and brag about their beautiful, wonderful culture. And then, people behind the scenes are miserable. Right. Because they're not actually practicing those things that you just talked about.
And oh, by the way, right, here's what I will tell you. If you talk to anybody that's worked with me before, I want people to call me out. If I'm not walking the talk and I'm not practicing what I preach, I want someone to tell me, right? It may not be intentional. It may be unintentional. And so I want to know, right, early and often, because if I need to pivot, I will, right? Because at the end of the day, and again, I'm just saying this because it's a passion of mine personally, culture trumps everything.
Everything.
And at the end of the day,
completely agree with that.
It could make or break an organization.
That's right.
And I've seen bad cultures break organizations, and I run for the hills.
But the customer can recognize this. The customer can feel it. And I believe that the customer wants to be the customer of a company that is really focused on growing a really healthy culture because it benefits the customer.
Okay, so the customer will remain nameless, but I had breakfast this morning at the Green Cafe, which is a Philadelphia staple. And, he had been a customer of mine twice before. And he said to me, Ed, you realize the reason why I follow you and will give you business wherever you go is you're part of the culture that I want to be associated with, and your people resonate with me because of what you practice and believe. Yeah. And that this morning resonated at 8 a.m. and it's true.
Listen, Ed, that's the reason why you go by a fast food restaurant at noon. Just name any fast food restaurant, and there's 5, 6, 7 cars in line. And then you go a block down the road and you go buy a Chick-fil-A, and the line is two lanes and is wrapped around the restaurant down the street.
Yep.
And it's not, listen, what is Chick-fil-A? Sorry, Chick-fil-A lovers. But what are they selling? A bag of poison. It's fast food. That's what I call it. Poison in a sack.
Yep.
Right? But why do people wrap around the restaurant for that? They're not buying the sack of poison. Right. They're buying the culture.
They're buying the culture.
They love the culture. It's my pleasure. The customer service. The order is going to be right. the customer benefits. But, talking about growing a culture, I said you got to be intentional about it. I grew up on a farm, and I remember as a kid growing up, my dad would say, so in this part of our land, we're going to grow sweet corn this year. Over here, we're going to grow cabbage. Over here, we're going to grow green beans. And guess what we planted in the ground? We planted corn seeds and bean seeds and cabbage seeds, right? And guess what grew? Those things.
Those things.
Right. Because we were intentional about what we wanted to grow. But guess what we didn't do? We didn't just put the seeds in the ground and then hope and pray for a good yield. We worked it. We worked it every day. And so one of the things that I think may, cause people not to focus as much on their culture as they should is a realization this is hard work, right?
It's very hard work.
I mean, you come into an organization and you're trying to grow a really healthy culture, you know that it's not easy to do.
It is not easy. And it's ongoing, right? So it's not like, by the way, the person that might have been an outperformer that's managing by fear and intimidation, right, that is delivering results and outcomes, they may have gone off the rails and it may not be recoverable. That doesn't mean that you ignore it. You have to act on it. You have to be intentional about it. And you need to practice what you preach.
And then on top of that, Ed, the market's going to throw you unfavorable conditions, right?
Right. And by the way, my experience is people take the path of least resistance and they don't like to confront issues, right? Any CEO I've ever worked with, I've never worked with one that wasn't a conflict avoider, okay? People think, oh, Ed, you deal with conflict. I actually don't like conflict in my personal life or in my work life. However, because culture matters, if the person is not living up to the culture and what we say is important, then we need to take action. And it has to be swift and immediate action.
Right, those are your weeds.
Those are my weeds.
So as much as you don't like conflict,
right,
you dislike the weeds even more.
Absolutely.
And so what you're saying is, I got to get out in the field and I got to get my hands dirty. I got to start pulling some weeds.
Yeah, and now.
Right, and now.
And it's not going to be easy, right, Bill? You mentioned weeds get bigger, the roots get deeper, right? So it's going to take work. But guess what? The outcome of not doing it is far worse than the outcome of doing it.
Sure, because what do weeds do? Weeds are taking nutrients out of the ground. Weeds are taking water out of the ground. Weeds are choking out the things that you actually want to grow.
Bingo.
So you got to get in there and you just got to start pulling.
And the people that you don't want to lose, you will.
Yeah.
Because you didn't take action.
That's right. They don't want to be surrounded by the weeds.
That's right.
And this is difficult, Ed, because, we can sit here and have a conversation, make it all sound simple. But the truth of the matter is, many times we love and care about these people. I know there have been many times where I've had to say to somebody, we're going to have to go another direction. And I know there's a family 3 miles down the road in a house who are looking at mom or dad, depending on that paycheck to pay the mortgage, pay the rent, put food on the table. And that's not lost on me. So it's not like I just look at it and say, oh, throw the weed out, it'll dry up on the ground and move on. There's emotion involved in this.
There absolutely is emotion, right? I mean, we wouldn't be human if there wasn't emotion to it. But again, if you stay the course, trust the process, right? And don't deviate. Don't deviate from what you know is the right thing to do. The consequences, the positive consequences far outweigh the negative consequences of not doing it.
Yeah. I think growing up on that farm in Ohio, my dad loved to farm, loved it, was passionate about it. And I can remember my dad just walking through the fields as he would watch the whatever we planted, the little seedling, pop its head out of the ground. I can remember my dad getting down and picking up a dirt clump and breaking it up and just looking at it and just, talking about, how this is going to be a challenging year or this is going to be a great year. My dad used to have a saying for sweet corn, knee high by the 4th of July.
Knee high by the 4th of July.
My dad believed that if the sweet corn was knee high by the 4th of July, we were going to have a good yield that year.
Now, Bill, is this bicolor, white or yellow?
Oh, yellow.
Okay,
yeah,
that's
yellow.
sweet corn. Okay.
But here's the thing, why I tell that story. My dad had a way of measuring every aspect of what he was doing. right? Great leaders have measurements in place to determine if their efforts are actually, successful. Even my dad, knee high by the 4th of July, that's a measurement. That's a KPI.
That's a KPI.
Right.
Yeah, I love it.
And my dad understood that if we had too much water, not enough water, whatever the case might be, too many weeds growing, knee high by the 4th of July was going to be a challenge. And so, what I learned from that is that people who do this, they love it. They're passionate about it. My point, people who are great at growing culture love it. They're passionate about it. They have all the measurements in place. They have the things that they're looking at that will tell them whether or not this is taking root.
Like I said, I've been fortunate to associate with organizations where I truly could recreate or grow a culture. In fact, after I left Mindspring, when the two companies merged and it became Earthlink, Interland, which was the last two companies to go public with Blue Martini Software, the CEO said, Ed, I want you to grow a culture here like you did at Mindspring. And what was so cool about it is that he gave me all the resources, all the empowerment, all the enablement, and the executive alignment and support to do just that. And when you have that, there's nothing better, right? Because now you're painting the Mona Lisa as if you're sitting in the Louvre, right? And you're watching it grow and evolve and become something masterful. And, how many times in your career do you get to do that?
Right.
It's pretty special, unique, and there's just a lot of reward to it.
Now, who is this that came to you?
This was the CEO of Interland.
Now, you said he came to you and said, I want you to grow. I bet he said, I want you to build.
He did say, I want you to build.
See, I already have a disciple.
That's what he said.
That's the power of influence.
Yep.
You're already using the word grow.
Yep.
I think I have a new convert.
You've converted me and have called me out on it.
That's fantastic.
I love it.
Well, Ed, listen, this has been a great conversation. No doubt that our viewers are going to really benefit from this. I love talking to people like you who are passionate about culture because I built a career around culture. And so I really enjoyed this conversation. You've been a wonderful guest. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you, everyone, for listening and for watching. So, Ed,
Bill, thank you,
my friend.
It's been my pleasure.
Well, thank you for tuning in. I hope today's conversation left you with a fresh perspective on leadership and culture. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, comment, and subscribe. Want to hear from other industry speakers whose goal is to bring along the next generation of leaders? Then log on to multifamilymedianetwork.com, where you'll meet some of the most innovative voices in the industry.